Now, what comes to your mind when you think of fox fur? Now, for me, I think of my grandmother when I was little. She had a fox stole. You know those things with the nose and the legs and this big long tail and those creepy, really fake eyes? Now, she wore it around her neck like everybody else did of her generation. But now when I think back on it, I think, man, that was really pretty creepy. Here's a crazy thing. Did you know the fox farms still exist all around the world and their only purpose is to raise these little guys for their fur? Now, I'm not going to get into the horrible details and how that works, but get this. Here in the U.S., we still have fox farms in 10 states. The good thing is we're one of the smallest, and actually Finland is the largest in the world. Now, here's something really crazy. Real fox fur is, again, this new old trend that's been coming back in style with some of the biggest fashion brands in the world. In today's episode, Nicole Navarro, she's the founder of Pawsitive Beginnings. It's a fox rescue organization. Now, she's got this great story to tell us. So you may be sitting there thinking, rescue a fox? What do you mean? Who rescues foxes, right? Well, here's something even more crazy. Pawsitive Beginnings is in Florida. Foxes, Florida? I thought it was alligators. But anyways, I'll let her tell you the story so you can understand. But here's a couple fox trivia snippets. Males are called dogs, and females are called, now wait for it, vixens. Yep, they're called vixens, fox vixens. And the group of foxes are called a few things. They're called skulks, leash, or earth. Now, I learned so much in this episode. Nicole's this amazing storyteller, and I know when you hear this episode, you're going to be packed full of all this new information and probably think different about fox fur. So sit back and get ready. It's a really great episode. We are supported by PrepVet, providing stem cell therapy for pets.
As a pet lover, did you know your pet can benefit from the incredible healing power of stem cell therapy? Prep Therapy offers a groundbreaking solution taken right from your pet's own blood. Say goodbye to joint pain, arthritis, kidney and liver conditions, and more. They'll experience faster recovery, increased vitality, and extended quality of life without the need for surgery or harmful drugs. Put the wag back in their tail and discover Prep Therapy today at PrepVet.com. Save 10% with promo code FurRealPodcast, covered by most pet insurance.
For real, 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 for real. Got a bunch of furry friends and I love them all the same. I'm an animal lover, veterinarian is the name. Let's share some pet stories from heartwarming to strange, losses and games, from wacky to insane. For real. You're now tuned in to For Real with your host, Mark Kyle.
Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the For Real podcast. Today, like I always say, I have a really great one. But you know how that old saying goes, there's a fox in the hen house? Well, guess what? There's a fox in her house. Our guest today, Nicole Navarro, she's got a fox rescue group down in the Keys. And we connected a while ago. And I can't wait till you guys hear everything because... And Nicole, I haven't even had a chance to tell you this. Doing some of the research is astounding. But anyways, Nicole, welcome to the show. I'm excited to hear everything, and let's start digging into it.
All right. I'm excited to be here.
Well, I'm more excited to have you, to be honest. So let's talk about you a little bit before we get into your organization and all that, because, you know, it's the journey that takes you to where your story is today. So let's go back. I know when we first talked, you grew up on a horse farm. So let's start there and then work our way forward.
Okay. Yeah, I grew up on a 30-acre horse farm in Western Pennsylvania. I'm the only child between my mother and my father, so I really had a good childhood. I was able to explore. I was able to be given the freedom to explore. I, would disappear in the woods. I'd rescue wildlife that didn't really need rescued
Yeah.
as a little child.
A typical kid.
Yeah, but the really cool thing was our next door neighbor was actually the wildlife rehabilitator for our local county park. So
Wow.
Aside from having, the domestic animals on a property, oftentimes we'd have native wildlife being rehabilitated and released. on the property. So from a very young age, I obviously felt very connected to animals and nature, and was afforded the very unique opportunity to be able to have respect and distinguish the difference between domestic and wild. So it was a really fun childhood.
Well, I lived all over the place growing up. I really can, I'm in Texas now. I mean, I moved to California for the years that I really remember the most. But when I was younger, I was a neighbor basically. We lived in New Jersey, and I remember as a kid, my brother and I. There's five of us, but we were the two closest in age together. We'd always go back in the woods and be walking around, and there was a guy at the back, the end of our woods that had a wolf
Oh,
sanctuary,
wow.
and he only had a few wolves. He got similar to what you're doing, but we would go back, and of course, there was all the kids' rumors and all that. But I remember doing that, and luckily, I was able to do an episode with the wolf sanctuary here in Texas, which everything that you think about wolves is completely different than what the reality is. But so anyway, let's get back to you though. I'm the least important guy on this thing. So you're in the woods, you're learning all the respect, and you're there. And so what's the next step? Where'd you go from there?
So, I mean, this was the 80s. I was born in 1980. So, graduated high school, did college for nothing animal related, actually, computer science at a technical school in downtown Pittsburgh. And really, life took me in a lot of different directions, but animals were always, a main theme, whether they were at the forefront or in the background. So I moved here to Key Largo in 2004. My mother owned a scuba diving business down here. This is where she moved after my parents got divorced. So the contrast between Pittsburgh and Key
I
Largo
know, it's crazy.
was quite a shock. So I did a lot of work in like the tourism industry, hotels. I still currently work in tourism. I work on a glass bottom boat down here in Key Largo. But in 2017, I know we cut out a huge chunk there, but to get to where I am today, in 2017, I was actually living in Key West, Florida. So that's the
Crazy town.
southernmost point of the continental United States. And I was working at the Hemingway home down there, where, as some of your listeners might be aware, they have a lot of cats, a lot of
Yeah,
six-toed cats down there to pay homage to Hemingway himself, who was
sure.
gifted a six-toe cat by a boat captain back when he lived and was alive in Key West. So I was working there taking care of the cats, and Hurricane Irma graced us with her presence here in 2017. And so myself and about 9 other staff members stayed behind, take care of the cats, had to round up all the cats. So the term herding cats really became a reality, trying to and make sure all the cats were safe during the storm. But after that, I reached out to, here in the Florida Keys, we are a very unique community. We are a very welcoming community, and sort of welcome anything that's outside of the box community. And our county jail, the main county jail that is in Key West, is actually home to a USDA certified zoo, believe it or not. So there's over 150 animals that live at our county jail in Key West that were all either confiscated, donated, surrendered, or abandoned. And it's a really unique program because the inmates come down every single day, care for the animals, feed the animals, clean up after the animals. And during Hurricane Irma, it was so severe and projected to be so devastating, they actually evacuated all of the inmates to another facility in West Palm Beach. And so the animals were actually moved up into the jail. So they would be safe
Into the jail?
into the jail, up
Wow.
into the jail, so they would be safe during the storm. And the woman that runs the farm, Jeannie Sealander, I reached out to her after the storm had passed and asked if she needed any help typically, they don't allow the public or volunteers to come when the inmates are there, just for obvious reasons. But since I knew the inmates were gone, I asked if she needed any help because she was basically there all alone. And she said, yes, please. So
Huh.
I went over and, helped, clean up the farm. I, bathed some of the horses, just general stuff to get the farm back in working order. And her and I became really, really good friends. So I was allowed to continue coming back to help volunteer even after the inmates returned. So in 2018, two foxes were surrendered to her. They had been someone's pets, actually, right here in Key Largo. And this woman decided she wanted a bit of a better life for them. So they were surrendered to the farm. And that was really my first up close personal experience with that species. And I just became completely infatuated. Not a lot of people get to try to form a friendship or a bond with a wild animal like a fox.
Right.
And foxes are really unique in the fact that they really don't just trust people. A lot of people compare them to dogs or cats or a mix of both. And I always like to sort of dispel that theory. A fox is a fox. They're a wild animal. And the thing about them is they really only form close bonds with one or two people and tolerate everyone else, which I think is hysterical. So I actually was able to form a really intense bond with both of those foxes and just really started doing some research, about where they came from, what the background is, how they are involved and intertwined in the exotic pet trade here. And there are still fur farms in operation in the United States, disgustingly enough.
Right.
And so I really wanted to start the research on how I could potentially start taking in foxes if they were surrendered from fur farms. That was my main mission.
So, but let's get back a little bit to the animal farm first of all. So
Yeah.
you're there working there. Obviously, and we know now that you created this huge bond with the fox. But do you guys? I know that most people don't realize how many wild animals are actually in Florida itself as well. There's a panther and a bunch of other things, and of course, there is the Tiger King. But
Hi.
yeah, I know. So do you get some of those like big animals as well, or is it mainly domesticated animals other than like the fox and things like that?
At the farm, what she gets, I mean, there's nothing truly large and dangerous. Like, there's no big cats, there's no large
Right.
wild canids like coyotes or wolves. There's a lot of exotic species that live there, like a quadrumundi. There's lemurs, there's miniature horses, ostrich, emu. She has a zebu. She does have a Cuban Nile crocodile and an alligator for educational purposes, but once they get large,
Sure.
they get transferred to another sanctuary. There's some reptiles there, a lot of tortoises, goats. So it's nothing that is extremely dangerous for obvious reasons because the inmates have to be able to feel comfortable being down there taking care of them.
Right. So on that program, we talked a little bit. I had an episode with Paws in Prisons where they bring in they rescue dogs from kill shelters and they train these dogs, but in doing so, they also help create skills for the inmates for when they get out. Are they doing that, or is it just their help that they're having the people from the sheriff's department come there to do that mainly just to give them some kind of work to do in a day? Is there a long-term goal for the inmates, or is it mainly just to be able to help manage the animal farm?
I think on a day-to-day basis, it's just to be able to help manage the animal farm. But these inmates are, handpicked. Not anyone gets the privilege. And, it is a privilege to be able to get out of the jail every day for these gentlemen and come down and, be outside and interact,
Sure.
with the animals. But what I've noticed is, when I'm there visiting or, helping out occasionally now, because I have my own thing going on here, is, these men oftentimes say that they feel far more compassion now.
Sure. Well, it gives them a sense of purpose too.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of times after they're released, they even bring their families back to visit because the farm is open to the public twice a month just for 2 hours. So the public can come in and, see the animals and, feel like they're part of what's going on there. But yeah, every one of the men that I've ever encountered when I've been there visiting is extremely, respectful and grateful for the opportunity. And, maybe when they took on, or asked to be part of the farm crew, they didn't realize that they could feel such a connection to animals.
Mhm.
So it's really amazing to watch the transformation that takes place in those gentlemen that are given the very unique and rare opportunity to be able to work with some of the species that they have there.
Well, here's the thing. Hurricane Irma gave you the opportunity, basically, as soon as it happened, to go there too, and look where you are now, what you're doing. I know you're working those eco tours and stuff like that. So let's
Right.
let's get back to foxes because that's what we're here for. And I like getting the backstory so everybody kind of understands what makes Nicole, at the end of the day.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you're there, you've got these foxes, you start doing some research, and so what's next?
So I really didn't have much of a plan. I went ahead and applied for the permit that I would need in the state of Florida to eventually be able to take foxes. So I had that permit in place already. And so we fast forward a little bit. I had done some research on other fox rescues in the United States at that time. There weren't that many. It's kind of a niche, a niche category. But I did find one here in Florida and I reached out to her and I would go and visit every once in a while. And then I found another facility in Minnesota that actually had developed, I guess, working relationships with a few fur farmers up in that area that would surrender foxes that were deemed undesirable. So undesirable for a fur farm fox would be that their coat is not good enough for the farmer to make money, so they would kill it regardless. I mean, generally, no animal on a fur farm ever makes it out alive, except for the few lucky ones that are surrendered from time to time.
So first off, so getting ready for this thing, of course, I did spend some time preparing. I'm stunned of what I didn't know about the fur industry, not only fox, but minks and some of the other things too.
Right.
Frankly, stunned. And, obviously in your website, you talk a little bit about this because I didn't even realize that there were fur farms here in the US. Of course, one of the things I read were 1%. I mean, they're all over the place, but it's what's weird about it, I think, and I found it really kind of strange in some ways. So you're dealing with these people that I'm sure you'd have a little bit less respect than you would normally do, given the fact that you know a lot more than most. And they're now giving you their defects, basically.
Well, let me clarify. I've never directly dealt with a fur farmer. Yeah, there's always
Okay.
a middle person. So another facility
Right.
works with the farmer to get them to surrender, and then that facility donates the fox. I've never been to a fur farm.
Well, who would want to?
Yeah. So I just want to clarify that I've never.
My point had nothing to do with you. I was thinking about them because
Oh yeah.
I mean, they've got to be thinking, wait a minute here. This is my enemy who's talking about how horrible I am. By the way, they are. And now I'm going to let them rescue this, this defect that can't bring me money. Let's get into, and I want your whole story, but let's get into, we can educate the listeners all about fur farms. And, I've done, I did some reading and all that. Of course, I read your website and I learned a lot more about fox too. But let's talk a little bit about the industry here in the US, I guess North America maybe is probably the more relevant one. Can you talk a little bit to that so people can understand how crazy it is, for saying the nicest word I can for that?
Right. So, I mean, here in the United States is not it, it's not as prevalent as it is in other countries, like China and Russia and
Finland.
Finland, yeah. But I mean, it is still happening here in the United States. A lot of fur farms in the United States have decided to close their doors, from my understanding, just because they realize that fur is sort of a dying industry.
Except for China.
Oh, well, yeah, a lot. But yeah, here in the United States, I think people are starting to just throw up their hands, throw in the towel,
Good.
because it is so widely looked down upon.
Well, as it should be.
Yeah.
When I've talked to a few people since, we were scheduling this thing, and I remember, when I was growing up, my grandmother had that fox stole or whatever that
Oh,
was around
yeah.
the neck, where you could see their tail and their head,
Yep.
and it's funny, without exception, any person that's basically over 40 that I've talked to about this, and it's not been that many, 4 or 5 people, everybody exact same thing. My grandmother used to have one of those.
Yeah.
What blows my mind, there are still people doing that, which I can't if I saw somebody wearing that now, I'd be going, "What the heck are they doing?"
Right. Yeah. It's just, it's a generational thing, but even the people that remember their grandparents having stuff like that, or, I've encountered a lot of people saying, oh, that was passed down to me, and I hate even looking at it because,
Right.
in retrospect, it is just so, I mean, creepy.
Well, it's creepy, and the crazy thing is, in that generation, we're talking 2 generations back, right?
Hmm.
That was a sign of being affluent and being wealthy. If you had one of those things, you were cool.
Right.
To me, that's insanity.
Right.
Yeah.
And, I think back then also people just didn't even want to think about where it came from or how it
No.
happened. But today you can't ignore it. I mean, you can Google videos,
Uh,
of fur farms and just see the horror that takes place. And, my big thing is, if you're wearing fur in this day and age, you are blatantly supporting animal cruelty, because everyone knows where it comes from and how it's produced now.
well, the thing that I read was, and I'm not gonna name the names, but there's some really high level designers
Oh,
that
yeah.
are still using fur.
Yep.
The fake stuff, you can't tell the difference. Why wouldn't you?
Right.
I mean, but they're like real big, big, big names without, trying to get people angry at us. But there's some big names out there that are still using fur, and you can do the research for you guys that are listening, but it's pretty crazy.
Yeah, and the founder of one of those big names, who is the major umbrella for so many other companies, put out a statement that he has zero plans on discontinuing the use of fur. And unfortunately, in the past few months, a lot of big name celebrities have come out again, some of which who vowed never to wear fur again, are now being photographed all over the place wearing real fur. So there's
It's
been
terrible.
an unexpected sort of resurgence in, people wearing fur, and uh, it
I
just
just don't get I just don't get it. I mean, obviously, the people that are wearing it, I'm gonna give them the benefit of the doubt, haven't done any time spending exactly what that means.
right,
I'm hoping that's the case because, one of the things I read was there's over 100 now. So fur is the second largest farms for foxes are the second largest fur farms. The other one is mink, and we all know about mink coats and all that kind of stuff.
right,
But there's over 100 million animals killed a year for fur,
right.
and then that equates to, this is the crazy thing, 3 animals killed per second every year.
Yeah. And that number does not include the over 1 billion rabbits
Oh.
that are killed for fashion every year.
Yeah, that's insane. It's crazy. Here's one thing I got to read to you, and then I want to get into your history, and I don't want to be the guy. You're the one that knows everything. So I read this thing there. I was doing probably Wikipedia or something, but it said reasons for people to get fur. This is the one. I mean, there's several of them, but this is the one that I just go, this is the most insane thing I've ever said. It's eco-friendly because it's real fur, and you're not screwing up the environment. You're just killing the animals. So like, eco-friendly. What a crazy term.
Yeah, that's total propaganda that's pushed
Yeah.
by the fur industry. It's just I mean, they've done actual studies on this, that the areas surrounding fur farms, oftentimes, which are, dense woods or
Right.
wetlands, it causes complete dead zones in those areas from the waste runoff, the feces runoff, the chemical runoff.
Sure.
So it's absolutely false. It is not eco-friendly. And a lot of the chemicals they use to preserve the fur have proven to be carcinogenic. So,
Oh, even better.
yeah, even better. So, yeah, and even one of the studies was put out by the fur industry. They thought it was going to be in their favor, but it turned out it was not. So I found that laughable. But yeah, it's definitely not eco-friendly. I mean, they're even making biodegradable faux fur now. So there's really no excuse.
Exactly. So let's get back to your story. I mean, we could talk for days on this because I mean, the more I read, the more I was stunned and shocked, and what it is. So you've got these two guys that you basically get this attachment to. You get a permit to have it there. So what's the next? What happens after that?
So from 2018 to 2020, I just, continuing to go down to the farm. In 2018, I moved back to Key Largo. Hurricane Irma was a little traumatizing, not going to lie. So I moved back to Key Largo, started working on the boat up here, would still go down to the farm. I mean, I would try to go down once a week. And then in 2020, COVID started, and the Florida Keys were literally shut down. There was a roadblock at the county line. You could not get into Monroe County unless you lived or worked here. And, by that time, I had built up some solid connections within the fox rescue community. So pretty much a day or two after I got laid off down here, because we shut down because we're a tourism-based county, I got a text message asking if I would be ready and willing to help take some foxes that were being surrendered. And without a second thought, I said yes. And then the next thought was, oh crap, I don't have a job. you know, how is this going to work? But I just trusted that it was the right thing to do, and I'm glad that I trusted that because so many people had watched the bond that I had formed with these two incredible foxes down at the jail. That once I put out a plea on social media asking for help, the help came. So the first two foxes that I was lucky enough to be able to provide a home to, their entire journey, their enclosure was fully funded by friends and family.
That's cool.
And yeah, the day after I brought them home in May of 2020, my IRS letter stating that I was now a federally recognized public charity came in the mail. So that was amazing. And then in July, I was asked once again if I could help take two foxes. So July of 2020, I said, yep, let's do it. And I've just trusted that things were going to work out since this all began, and it absolutely has. And it's grown into something that,
Well, it's recognized all over the world now. But here's a question for you. So the ones that are the people that are asking you that they had some availability, are they other rescues that just didn't have the room for it, or why are they coming to you versus keeping them themselves? What's typically the reason?
at that time back in May of 2020, well, I guess a few months prior to that, I think there were about 20 or 30 that were being surrendered.
Mm-hmm.
So that organization took some, and then, they just
Oh, I
reach
gotcha.
out. Yeah, they just reach out to other facilities because, they never know how many exactly are going to be undesirable. And I'm air quoting that right now.
Yeah, well,
Um,
I read the bio and all your little cute guys, right? And yeah, because they can't produce. I mean, there's a reason why. Can you walk through the term? I'm going to say defect, but you're going to say undesirable, using your air quotes.
yeah.
What are the reasons why these guys are being given to the rescue groups? Well, let's talk about some of the reasons.
So if they're adults being given up by the fur farmer, typically they have some sort of defect. Their coat isn't good enough, or they're missing some body part. And, without a full pelt, they can't make the fur farmer money once the fur farmer kills them. With younger foxes, babies that are just being born on a fur farm, oftentimes, because the environment is obviously so stressful, the mother will start to harm her young. So that would be another reason. That's how I got the 4 young ones I have. Uh, they start to eat them, or will just flat out
Right.
kill their young. So,
And one of the things you mentioned on your website is, and it's a question you get all the time, is why they're not being reintroduced into the wild. Can you get into that detail, the reasoning for that? It makes sense once you explain it, but
right.
can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So fur farming first started in the late 1800s on Prince Edward Island in Canada. So all of these foxes that are being born in captivity today are generations removed from any wild fox. None of these foxes have ever been wild. Therefore, it would be illegal to reintroduce them into the wild. I mean, that might be the most important factor. But number two, even though instinctually they are wild animals, they were never afforded the opportunity to express those instincts in a setting that would set them up for success should they ever be released into the wild. So none of my foxes here, I can say with 100% confidence, would be able to survive
Right.
in the wild. On a fur farm, even, they're used to being fed every day. They have zero room to go out and hunt or dig or forage or den. So the chances of them surviving would be slim to none. So it would be cruel to think that you could release them. A lot of people confuse wildlife rehabilitation because they are wild animals.
Right.
With wildlife rehabilitation, you're taking an animal that has already been wild and reintroducing it after, the injury is fixed, or, whatever the circumstance is. There's no way to train an animal that has never been wild, and that is 80 to 100 generations removed from any wild animal, to be wild.
Right. And so let's talk about, I know we talked a little bit about defects. Well, actually, you know what? Let's talk about life at a fur farm for these guys, because when they come, these animals have been in this fur farm and they've been living the life, and that's, I'm going to put air quotes on that one.
Yeah.
And they get to you, but what's it like for a fox in a fur farm in their life before they get to you?
Well, I mean, a lot of us have a saying, the only thing worse than dying on a fur farm is living on one.
Um,
They have zero veterinary care. They live in 4x4 or 5x5 wire cages suspended off the ground for their short, miserable lives. Um, they're exposed to the elements. The only time they have a larger space is, in the spring when the females are giving birth. Uh, it's, it's just cruel
right.
because, again, even though they've never been wild, they still have those instincts to roam, to dig, to play. Um, it's it's just horrifying. And then the way they kill them on fur farms is just disgusting.
Oh, well, and a matter of fact, hold your ears for you guys listening out there, because the way they kill them is, I don't even like to use inhumane. Is not even a good way of describing it. I mean,
No,
I'm gonna say that what I read, and tell me where I'm wrong. They suffocate them, they electrocute them, they poison them.
yeah,
I mean, it's horrible.
yeah. So the smaller species like mink, mink, chinchilla, they typically gas them or just stun them. But with larger species like the fox, bobcat, they will electrocute them through the mouth and anus, as that allegedly preserves the fur. And oftentimes it's not an instant death. They're basically forced to suffer through a heart attack until they eventually die.
It's horrible.
Yeah,
It's absolutely horrible. And the other thing that I read is they typically do it in the wintertime because they have a bigger coat. So basically,
correct.
Thanksgiving and Christmas is not a good time for a fox.
No. Yeah, most of the foxes typically they won't live to see their first birthday.
For me, it's again, like I said, I'm stunned by what I read. The fact that we even have 1% of the farms here in the US. I know there's more in Canada because they're where they get the bigger coats, they're in colder environments. But the fact that we would even have 1% here in the US, I've done a lot. We had one with the dog factories, our dog farms in South Korea, but that's a cultural thing. You would think the US, it's not a cultural thing. I mean, I know that we had back in the day the beaver coats and all that kind of stuff in the 1800s, but now it's just I just don't get it.
I don't understand why the United States is still allowing this to take place. They're treated like agriculture. These fur farms are governed by the USDA.
But what I read though, and I saw in your thing, so it's actually different than what I read. So I wanted to ask you this question. So one of the things I read, it says that we're really not regulated by the USDA. Now you said some are and some aren't in your website, so I'm not sure which one's right. But could they kind of fall under the radar so that it almost hides what's going on?
So the USDA stopped reporting on fur farms years ago because of the backlash, because of the attacks from organizations liberating these animals from the fur farms. So there's really no way to tell.
PETA and stuff like that.
Um, I I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't believe PETA doesn't actually go in and break laws like that, because if you
Uh-huh.
any sort of attack on an agricultural facility in the United States, you get labeled as a domestic terrorist.
Sure.
So I don't
Understandably so.
PETA wants wants any part of that.
Yeah.
But there are underground organizations who have gone in and caused damage to fur farms and released animals from fur farms. So I think because all that was taking place, they stopped reporting accurate numbers, addresses, names of these people. So there's really no way to tell how many are truly operating. There's a lot of hobby farms,
Right.
from what I've heard, but the larger ones are governed by the USDA. So there's minimal animal welfare guidelines.
Well, thank God there's people like you. So now you've got the babies that are coming there because they were, like you said, undesirable or whatever you call them. I call them defects because they couldn't sell them. So you start getting these things, and let's kind of fast forward to we're in 2020, 2021. You're doing COVID and all that stuff. So you've won all these awards now. You're doing all this really cool stuff. So I'm pretty excited for you. So let's talk a little bit about life at positive living.
Positive living.
Yeah.
Positive
Yeah.
living. Positive beginnings. Yeah. So today we have 8 boxes here.
Right.
And at the end of 2022, I got a wild idea, which is not uncommon for me. that sharing these foxes stories of survival with humans that might be experiencing or working to overcome intense trauma could be beneficial. So we have a amazing women's holistic mental health facility here in Key Largo called Kinder in the Keys. And I reached out to their director and had a very interesting initial conversation. But again, the thing about the Florida Keys is everyone loves out of the box. So I started taking a fox over there and sharing their story with the women, and it really took off.
So wait a minute. So the women's facility, are they abused women or?
No, well, I'm not privy to their backgrounds.
Okay.
You know, they're
Okay.
all protected by HIPAA. If they choose to share with me, they can, but I legally cannot say anything about them.
Sure, sure. The reason why I'm asking is you've got these animals that have been abused,
Right.
and now you've got these women that are going through whatever sort of trauma they're getting, and they're helping each other.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I mean, it is a trauma-based recovery facility. So PTSD is common,
Sure.
trauma is common. I would assume, domestic violence is part of some of their stories. But again, unless they share with me, I really don't know.
Okay.
But I can see that when I share the fox's stories, at times the women will start to tear up. So I can tell that they are able to truly connect and identify with some of what these animals have been through. And, I mean, it's proven that animal assisted therapy is effective. These foxes are not therapy animals. They could never be certified as such for obvious reasons. But we really tapped into,
But their story is.
yeah,
Their story.
yeah. So their stories are used as a therapeutic tool. And I guess the bonus is they get to meet the actual survivor.
So some of the things I read about fox is that they're kind of a solitary animal unless they're like you said earlier, they don't run like in huge packs,
No,
but there be one or two when they have families, but oftentimes they're by themselves, right?
correct.
Yeah.
So all my foxes are red fox species, even though none of them are really red in color. And again, that's due to breeding and what's desirable for fashion purposes on the fur farm, blah, 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 blah. But these animals here, all of mine, none of which are related. I'm guessing, I don't really know, but my guess is none of them are related, have really formed a bond of their own. It's like survivors of a sinking ship. They've shared in common peril, and now they can appreciate each other's company.
So basically, I'm going to use a couple names. You've got Kai and Reef, and I know some other ones. So Kai looks at Reef and said, the place I was at, they didn't like me because I didn't have a good tail. And then Reef looks at him, and again, I don't know what's wrong with either one of them. And Reef goes, yeah, you see my ears? They didn't like my ears. So guess
Right.
what? We got to come here.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the younger ones, bicker and argue like siblings would, but
Sure.
there's never been a fight per se. And it is very unique. Two of the foxes, the first two I got, live together, live alone. They really only enjoy each other's company. They don't even really like me, and that's okay. I didn't save them to have, fox best friends.
Right, right.
I saved them to save them. So those two live together, and then the other six live in another enclosure, and they all get along for the most part. Again, yeah, they're like children. They have their disagreements, but there's never been, you know, a fight.
As any being does. They all have that.
Right.
And they probably don't trust you too much, even though you're feeding them, but their experience with humans isn't too good. One of the things that I read, which is I think is lucky them, is in the wild that fox don't live, usually they live 3 to 4 years, but in captivity, which is pretty typical in any animal, they live a lot longer. So they're going to have a lot, even though they had a horrible beginning, obviously you probably got them before they were a year old because that's generally when they put them down. But so they're going to live a better life and hopefully have a more quality of life, I would think.
Yeah, so obviously if they would have stayed where they were, wouldn't
They wouldn't be here anymore.
they wouldn't be here. The younger ones that I got, yeah, we have a long road together.
Yeah.
Some of the adults that I have were a little older, maybe 1 or 2. The oldest fox I have, Jasper, he'll turn 8 or 9 this year. So he
Wow.
was used as a breeder year after year. So he was on the fur farm for about 4 years, and when I got him, his quality of life was not good at all. He could barely walk. Again, living on a
Cage.
living on wire his entire life. Obviously, his muscles had not formed. He had very flat feet.
Atrophy, yeah.
His back was dipped. He had chronic arthritis.
Mm.
But with our amazing in-home holistic veterinarian that's been treating him now for almost 3 years, Jasper can run rather quickly, I might add. He can climb up on the platforms. The only thing he cannot jump, which is fine because he is allowed access to our front yard now. So he goes out in the front yard with the dogs every morning, gets some snacks, does a lap or two, and then wants to come back inside. So
Okay, so let me ask you about that. So they're not on a leash or anything, or he just hangs out?
yeah, no, I mean our front yard is fully fenced in.
Yeah, but still, I mean, the one thing I read is, in their class, which are, they're in the same class as dogs, wolves, jackals, and fox. They're the one that can climb a tree. So,
Because of Jasper's severe arthritis,
oh, I gotcha.
he can't do
Okay.
many of those things. He can't jump at all. And he's pretty stiff, but he's come a long, long way in the 4 years that I've had him.
That's pretty cool. One of the things you'd mentioned before we did a recording is that fox are on every continent in the world with the exception of Antarctica. I wonder why they're not there.
I don't know. You would think there might be.
Yeah.
I think that's the fact. I think that's
No, I looked it up after you told me just to kind of,
okay.
and so I verified that whether or not that's true or not. You never know on the internet what's true or not.
Right.
But now you've got this thing. Now you're the crazy fox lady, or maybe you're sly as a fox. A couple of things I've really found really kind of got a smile about. So a male fox is called a dog, and a female fox is called a vixen.
Correct.
Which I guess that's where the name comes from. Because you always hear about the vixen. That fox is a vixen, but I mean, I thought it was pretty kind of funny. And then the babies are called either pups or kits, I guess.
Yes. Yep.
That's cool. That's really cool. So I want to talk about a couple other things about you.
Okay.
So me doing a little bit of reading, on February 2nd was a big day for you, wasn't it?
February 2nd.
Yeah. What was February 2nd? Yeah, I read.
That's a month ago. I don't remember what happened yesterday.
Well, you got the award as the unsung hero
Correct.
by the community.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. So the Community Foundation of the Florida Keys every year recognizes those of us in the community that seek no recognition for the work that we do. And so someone has to nominate you for that. So I'm not sure who nominated me, but it was a really big honor, especially to be in a room with 89 other members of Monroe County that do what they do because they're called to do it.
Well, they want to give back. They realize that by giving, you get more, and they have big hearts.
Yeah.
Now, the last thing I want to talk about before we get into everybody that's going to cringe, my joke thing, let's talk about Reef and Reef's little deal that he's got in the paper, the local paper. I read some of the articles. I thought they were great.
Reef is Reef is the first kit that I welcomed to Pawsitive Beginnings in 2021. So you would say he's my firstborn. I took him everywhere with me. He was quite the celebrity when he was younger.
He is a celebrity.
Yes, and that really morphed into him being a literal celebrity here in the Florida Keys. So the Keys Weekly newspapers offered him his own weekly column, which he writes for every single week. And he has been named Best Local Celebrity in the Upper Keys for the last 2 years now, beating out all of his human competition. So yeah, again, the Florida Keys are definitely unique, and I really can't imagine having these animals anywhere else in the world. And especially to be using them, I don't like that term, using them, but providing the service to the community that I am now, and the partnerships we've created with this animal assisted therapy program. Even this afternoon, I have children from the Florida Keys Children's Shelter coming to participate. So yeah, it has been, I would say, the most rewarding journey of my life. And in the grand scheme of things, I feel like it's only just begun.
Of course it has. What I love about it is that the community recognized, one, the work that you're doing. I mean, it started with the I guess the petting zoo or the animal farm, and the journey took you to this, and now you're saving these guys. And I would really encourage anybody out there that's listening to do the research on, or do some internet searching on fox and fur farms. We just touched a little bit on it. It's insane. I mean, I'm shocked that of some of the stuff I read. It's really really gross, actually, at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's horrifying what humans can do to animals.
But you know what? When you find out those horrible things that humans do, and then you find good humans like you that are doing what you're doing, which I think is really cool and it's commendable in so many different ways.
Well, thank you.
Okay, so let's get to the joke thing, because I know we promised it'd only be so long because I know you had to get going. So as everybody is listening, I know you're already cringing for you guys to listen all the time. So today's joke is one that's related to the fox. So here, I'm going to ask you the question, Nicole, and see if you can have the answer.
Oh boy.
Why should you never make a fox angry? You're going to cringe.
I know, because I've seen foxes angry. I don't know.
Okay, so this is related to Fox and the show because they never forget.
Oh boy.
Isn't that a great one? Now you know what I was saying.
Yep.
Anyways, for everybody that's out there listening, obviously we need help. I know these jokes are cringing. Please, please, if you want to tell a joke, or if one of your kids want to tell a joke, or have a friend that loves telling jokes, we can always use help. Send me an email to mkyle@forrealpodcast.com. Or if you've got a great topic like this one that you think that should get out there for there, please send it to me. I promise you I'll respond. So last thing, Nicole, for everybody to find out about what you're doing, and if they want to get a hold of you, they want to donate, can you give them all that? We'll have it in the description of the episode for you guys listening, but can you also put it out there now, like, social media, website, all that kind of stuff, so that people know how to get a hold of you?
Yeah, so the easiest thing to do would be go to our website, which is pawsitivebeginnings.org, and that's PAWSITIVE beginnings.org. And from there, you can navigate anywhere, how to donate, how to send the foxes a gift from their Amazon wish list. And the footer are the links to our social media. So that is the easiest way to get everything people might be looking for.
Great. And I'm following you guys now myself and seeing some of the stuff. And I would really encourage everybody who's listening, go to the website. You get to see all these guys, and you get to meet the ones that she's got there. And the funny thing, we didn't say this, but the red fox is the most populous fox in the world. But these foxes are red fox, but I don't know if any of them are red that you have. Are they? They're red colored.
One fox, Penny, I have is red in color, but even she is not a true red. She's a man-made color called Dakota Gold. And I don't even like using these fashion names, but
Yeah.
she is red in color, but she's not true red. Everyone else,
I like that black one. The black one with the white hair is really cute too.
coral.
Yeah.
Yeah. And believe it or not, she is the only fox I have that is a color that would naturally occur in the wild. Yeah.
Oh, that's crazy. Okay. Well, anyways, first of all, Nicole, thanks so much for being on. I know you're busy. You're doing wonderful things, and I just really, really appreciate you joining this thing.
Well, thank you for having me. This was a lot of fun.
That's always fun for me. And for everybody else that's listening, please pass this on. All these stories that we do all the time, for me, it's wonderful because when I have a guest coming on, I spend some time learning about this, but it's worth learning. These stories are amazing. You meet some amazing people that have been on the show. But most importantly, I really appreciate you guys are listening and the regular listeners all the time. It's important to me, and from the bottom of my heart, I really, really appreciate you. For real. Everybody have a great day.
For real, 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 for real.
We're supported by Let's Walk, that's here to love your animals like our own.
Austin, Houston, and Denver. Let's Walk is here to love your animals like our own. From daily walks, play, in-house sleepovers, and more. Go to work, out on the town, or take a vacation knowing your pets are in the best hands. This woman-owned small business does it all. Check us out on Instagram at Let's Walk Austin, Houston, and Denver.
That concludes this episode of For Real with your host, Mark Kyle. For previous and future episodes of For Real, listen via all major podcast streaming sites.